Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk with PAP. I'm Yvonne Chan. In tonight's episode, we discuss a topic that's close to the hearts of many Singaporeans, housing, together with the Minister for National Development, Mr. Lawrence Wong,
Evening, Yvonne.
and PAP candidates, Mr. Alex Yam and Ms. Rahayu Mazam. We will discuss improvements in public housing as well as its affordability for first-time HDB buyers and the value of HDB flats as they get older. Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you on set with me this evening. Now, our public housing program in Singapore has often been regarded as one of the best in the world. We've been lauded for a very careful bottom-up design approach to our neighborhoods with easy accessibility to transportation as well as education. Now, 2020 has been a year that's been very much clouded by COVID-19, but it is a significant year for HDB as well because it is HDB's 60th anniversary.
That's right.
First Minister Wong, I'd like you to kick us off with a brief overview of what HDB has achieved over the last few years.
Sure. Well, housing is a topic that's close to the hearts of many Singaporeans because we are a nation of homeowners. And since the PAP government put in place HDB 60 years ago, it has become a national institution. It is unique. You do not see public housing systems anywhere in the world like what we have in Singapore. And it's something that every Singaporean, regardless of your beliefs, regardless of your background, every Singaporean can justifiably take pride in it. We have, over the years, transformed our living environment, provided better homes, better amenities and facilities in all our neighborhoods, but importantly, created that sense of community and identity in who we are as Singaporeans. And HDB is a very integral part of this. I grew up in Marine Parade housing estate in a HDB flat in the 70s and 80s. So the East will always have be a special part in my heart, and I will always remember the times that I spent in that part of Singapore. When I started serving in politics in 2011, my first constituency was in Boon Lay in the west, not too far away from Rahayu, in Jurong. So then you know that Singapore may be such a small island, but east-west is north-south. It's different.
Yes, very different.
Each place has its own unique characteristic. That sense of place, familiarity of different landmarks. People grow up with that and they develop an attachment and a connection to the place and the community.
There's a strong sense of belonging.
That's right. So that's what's so special about HDB in Singapore. I recognize fully that it's not a perfect system, but the reason why it is successful is because year after year we are continuously reviewing and updating our housing policies. So if I were to share a slide.
Yes, please. Let's pull up a slide.
If you look at what we have done in the last 5 years,
okay.
We have done things like enhanced our housing grants. We have provided more flats. More than 150,000 families have booked or collected their keys to their first homes in the last 5 years. Many of these flats have shorter waiting times. We have enhanced the grants. We have provided more help for divorcees and single parents. And we have raised the income ceiling so more can qualify to purchase a subsidized HDB flat. Many of these changes and updates to housing policies were done by the government through constant feedback and suggestions. We listen to the views of Singaporeans. We listen to the views of many members of parliament. So Alex Yam, for example, Alex has been the chairman of the Government Parliamentary Committee in the last term of government, last term of parliament. Mooted many of these ideas. Rahayu too in parliament had suggested many of these ideas. So that's our commitment by the PAP. Whether as an elected member of parliament or in government, we are committed to continuously refresh, update, improve our housing policies and our housing programs to make it better and to build better homes for everyone.
Thank you, Minister. Now, just to pick up from where you left off, I would just like to invite Alex and Rahayu to maybe share with us some of these, ideas that you fed into the HDB and enhancement scheme. Maybe Alex.
Well, I would say that for many Singaporeans, the growing up experience for most of us is in a housing estate. My earliest memory was in playing in the playground in Ahut Road. And today when I go back, the entire place has transformed. It's so different. It's better, there are more facilities, and you see people moving in, new flats coming out. And I think that's why housing is at the core of our own experiences. It's part of that social compact that we as a government have with Singaporeans. And that's also why people are so passionate about the topic. And a lot of the things that we've looked at over the years, and we're very thankful to Minister and the Ministry for always being open to ideas, being open to suggestions. I remember 2018 during the Committee of Supply, one of the, in my opening speech, I said, one of the things that my residents face is that they're happy that their incomes are improving, right? But at the same time, they're also very troubled that very soon they'll have an income level that would surpass the income ceiling. So I brought that up in 2018, and I was very, very happy for my residents that in 2019, Minister announced that we will raise not only for HDB BTOs, but also for executive condos. So I think that shows how the HDB and the MND does listen and knows the reality on the ground and tries to address these issues as they come along.
There's really a constant review of feedback that's coming from the bottom up as well.
Indeed.
Thank you, Alex. Rahayu.
I'm a divorce lawyer, and so housing upon divorce is a very tricky issue, especially when you have children involved. And because you take away, that stability, because it's an asset, it's a matrimonial asset that has to be divided upon divorce, and then it puts in question as to what are the living arrangements going to be like. So many a times, divorced couples have had to figure this out, and also in the course of discussions, figure out who will have the care of the children and all that, because that ties in to whether or not they'll get ability to get subsidized flats. So one of the policies that was in place some time back was the wait of 3 years before you can actually get the subsidized flat, and that was very painful. Understandably, there were limitations of public housing, but at the same time, they didn't choose to be in those circumstances. So to have that imposed on them was tough. So it was very refreshing, and I was actually, I think we said it was pleasantly surprised when there was a move in 2018, I believe, to take away that wait period. As long as they meet the eligibility requirements, they could proceed. And there was support for divorcees who had children to kind of expedite the process so that they could get a flat faster. So I think those things were very useful. And of course, single parents, this was something that we raised repeatedly. We've had residents coming up and say, hey, why can't we get a flat, because of our circumstances. And I'm very glad to see that also change. And I think it's a reflection of how, yes, it may take time. And, at the start, I say, why is the government like that? But I think these are examples of how the government actually listens. So I'm hoping to also push for more.
Of course, you should.
So hopefully, because our society changes and our needs, changes. And so I'm glad to see movements in this direction. So hopefully, over time, as things change, we'd also keep improving the policies so that key thing, people will have access to housing and the stability. Because that HDB flat, that house is so important and sacred to the family, especially the children.
Absolutely. I mean, we'd love to hear you both as well come up with even more ideas tonight, because Minister Lawrence Wong is in the house, so we're going to throw some ideas at him. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the perennial question of affordability.
Sure.
That is top of mind for so many Singaporeans, and as the cost of living goes up, we're also worried whether our flats will remain as affordable. Minister, what do you have to say to that?
Well, that's our basic commitment to ensure that every young couple in Singapore wanting to purchase their first home will be able to afford their homes. And there are various ways in which you can look at affordability. Very often you will hear parents saying, I bought my flat at $30,000.
But
now you add one more zero. But remember, incomes have gone up significantly over time as well. So the right way to look at it is really housing price as a ratio of income, the price to income ratio.
Okay.
And if you look at the home prices as a ratio of incomes, in various major cities everywhere around the world, in places like New York, London, it's as high as 10. In Hong Kong, it's 20.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 20 times of your income. We in Singapore and in HDB are committed to keeping it below 5. And that's at a macro figure. What does it translate to? So the best way to think about this is to give you a worked example. So
Okay.
let me be a property agent to explain to you what it means.
Yeah, I'd like you to unpack it all
Yeah.
down for us. Yeah.
So again, if I may use a slide, because that's the easiest way to explain.
Okay, let's bring up our next slide,
There are many
please.
figures. Let's say you are a young couple, and you are earning an income of $5,000 a month together. That's at the 30th percentile of income. That's not even median income. So we're talking somebody at the 30th percentile purchasing a 4-room flat. It cost about $300,000, slightly more in Bukit Batok, East. And if based on that income, that price is already a subsidized price. But based on that income, they will easily get a grant of about $40,000. So in fact, with that $40,000 grant, you can pay the down payment. 0 upfront payment for your flat, for the booking of the flat, right? You take a 25-year loan, you service the loan every month. It costs about $1,000 a month, but based on your income, you literally can pay for it entirely using CPF, and you have 0 cash outlay. 0 upfront payment, 0 cash outlay every month, and the flat is yours. That's not at the median percentile, that's at the 30th percentile of income. So, and this is not a unique example. If you look at the recent years, more than 80%, more than 80% of first-time home buyers have been able to purchase flats, whether new or resale, with 0 or very little cash outlay every month. That's something that you will never find anywhere in the world for the whole society. And that's our commitment, that we want to ensure that every Singaporean will be able to own their own home, and we will ensure that that Singapore dream of being able to purchase and own your home remains secure both now and in the future.
What about Rahayu and Alex? I mean, your residential take-up for this, there must be some appreciation for a plan like this.
Of course, but if I may jump into on Minister's
Yes.
point earlier, the example of the no cash outlay, the grants and everything, but that's for non-mature estate. That's what we're encouraging the majority of Singaporeans to go for. But in recent years, as PM has announced at National Day rallies, the Greater Southern Waterfront, Pasir Panjang and such.
Yeah.
So many people, especially younger Singaporeans, are also aspiring to these prime locations.
Yes.
So how do we ensure the affordability
Yeah.
continues to be there, and yet not create some sort of stratification that I'm luckier than others, or I managed to get it and therefore I'm better off.
People like prime location. How?
Well, in property, it's all about
Yes,
location,
where you
location,
live. Yeah,
location.
yeah.
So we are very
What do we do
mindful
about
of that. We are very mindful, and it's something that's been on our minds, and we've been studying this for quite some time. I do tell everyone that you never know what will happen to a non-mature estate 30 years from purchase. When my parents bought Marine Parade, it was reclaimed land, and nobody wanted it.
And now?
Look at what Marine Parade is like today. But still, despite my encouragement, we talk about non-mature estates, and these are the areas where we have lots of land, and that's why we are able to build more new flats, and that's why we can provide the assurance for young couples buying a flat. We keep the price stable and affordable, and you are able to get a flat within 2 or 3 applications, for certain. But the difficulty is for a mature estate where there's very limited land, and for prime locations, even more limited land. First of all, the resale flat prices there are higher, much higher. And then we have an issue of if we were to sell a new HDB flat in that location at a very low price, equivalent to what would be, what the price would be in, say, a non-mature estate, it really has too much of a difference. And that would mean that everybody would rush in to get it, and the lucky one that gets that flat, in Hokkien they say "tio bei pio lah," you know, you win the
I
lottery.
understand that, yes.
You know, so you'll be very happy.
You would.
But it would not be fair to everyone else who doesn't get that flat. So how do we solve this problem?
What do you say to those who have aspirations, who
That's
still have
right.
aspirations, who want to stay there in these prime
That's
locations?
right. And if we don't build new flats, or if we build new flats with higher prices, then, as Alex said, you end up with only the ones with means being able to purchase such flats, which is not ideal either, because we really do not want to see stratification
Bigger divide.
by districts where, you know, in some areas only the people with means can live there, even in HDB flats. So we have been thinking very hard about changing to a new model of HDB flats for mature or for prime locations, where we will price the flats a lot more affordably than where they are today, meaning to say it will be much cheaper than the resale flat that's next door. But the flat will have to be sold with additional conditions,
Right.
restrictions. Exactly what kinds of
Yes, I was
restrictions,
just about to ask that. You preempted me. I was like, what are those conditions?
we are still studying. I mean, there are different things you can think about, right? When you talk about purchasing of a flat, there are the lease. You can think about the what you do when you sell the flat, what kinds of conditions are imposed on you with regard to sales. We can think about the minimum occupation period. There are a whole range of parameters that we can consider, and which we are actively studying.
Okay.
So this is potentially something that we will introduce in the near future.
Okay.
A completely different model of HDB flat that will allow for the prices to be kept affordable, but the conditions of sale, the restrictions will be different from a normal HDB flat. And we will introduce these models, this new model of HDB flat in these locations that I highlighted, potentially a site in the Greater Southern Waterfront, which would be something that people would aspire to live in, but it would be priced affordably, but with the restrictions that I mentioned.
Will this still be fielded to, like, say, first-time home buyers, or what sectors are you looking at?
We're talking about
First-time
first-time home
buyers,
We're
okay.
talking about first-time home buyers.
Rahayu, sorry, go on, Minister. Oh, Rahayu, you had something to say?
No,
just
I
now.
mean,
Wanted to
I'm
chime
just
in.
happy to hear about the, I suppose, options that are available in different sort of packages. I think because people have different needs and desires. I mean, one, as Alex pointed out, is that aspiration to live in a prime area. But the other thing that I also always see are residents who want to live near their parents, who live in mature estates, and it's totally understandable. You know, Yvonne, you have kids.
Childcare,
Exactly.
yes.
I can't live without my mom,
Yeah,
you know,
neither
taking care of
can
my
I,
kids.
yes.
And
I live close to my mom as well.
so it's something that we can truly appreciate. So that's been a challenge, trying to
Yes.
explain to
That's right.
residents about how, because the BTO in the mature estates are limited. So they'll be queuing and they'll be applying, and when we try to ask them to cast their eyes elsewhere to the newer estates where there's more land to build, they said, oh, but it's so far for my parents. So and some of the things I've been sort of advising my residents is to really consider purchasing a resale flat
That's right.
within the mature estate. Yes, in some places the prices are a bit too high, but the grants that are also given by HDB, the enhanced ones, are also significantly higher. And so that's something I'm appreciative about. But I think this is something that we can continue to review and look into, because so that's that idea of a buffet or different options that's available for different people. It's just that it might not exactly be what they want, but for them to be able to look into it. Because the one typical complaint they have is that, I buy the flat, but I still have to renovate, and that's an extra cost, And so these are things that I can appreciate. So, I mean, I don't know if there's any clear solutions, but these are things that I like to see evolving in the HDB policies.
So we do hear this quite often, where young parents would like to live near their, parents, so that they can live together, and then also helps with the children, childcare
Absolutely.
needs.
Yes, grandparents.
that's one of the reasons why, one of the key motivations why we enhanced the housing grants for resale flats not too long ago, and you can get up to $160,000 if you were to purchase a resale flat as a first-timer. That's a significant help for a first-timer looking to purchase a flat. And very often you also hear that they would like to get a new flat, and this is one area where it's very, very hard to solve, right? Because in a mature estate, there are not so many sites available for new flats. And if I only have limited supply, but I have many, many more people wanting to purchase a flat in that particular, a unit in that particular new project, I have to ballot it. That's the fairest way to do so. It's very hard for me to accede to one appeal and then say no to another. And all are equally deserving. All have parents nearby whom they want to live close to. So I would like to say yes to all, but I do not have a magic wand that can allow me to solve this problem. So we try to do it through multiple solutions. One, as best as we can, we build as many what we call new flats in infill sites in these mature estates. Then it's up for balloting. Number two, we enhance the housing grants so that there are more options for people to buy resale flats nearby. Thirdly, not a very popular option, but it's still there, and some people do take it up, is parents move out together with you to a new estate. And again, there's help, there's priority for you to do so. So then all move out to a new estate. You can go to Punggol, you can go to Tengah, which is beautifully designed, and you can live together in a new flat too. So there are multiple options.
There are options out there.
That's right.
But how about this issue of COVID-19 has impacted a lot of people's incomes, and I think new home buyers or aspiring home buyers may have to put pause to their plans because they're unable to afford these flats now, or new flats during this period of time. What is HDB doing to help people who are in these circumstances?
So we are monitoring the situation very carefully due to COVID-19. There are multiple concerns. One is, I think, home buyers and potential home buyers are first of all concerned about, will the flats even be built?
Oh yes, the construction industry
because
has
of
been
the
badly
whole
hit as
impact of the construction industry.
Yeah.
And our assurance is we had projected at the start of the year 16,000 to 17,000 units, new BTO, new flats this year. And we are committed to delivering that amount of new flats.
But that number was pre-COVID, right?
That's pre-COVID,
Yeah, but
but
still.
the demand will still be there. So I think the fact that people want to buy new flats, the young couples out there who want to buy, the demand will still be there, and we will commit to building that same number this year. Some of the projects may get delayed, may be pushed back by a few months, but we will get them done. As far as affordability is concerned, then it goes back to my earlier point, because how we price the new flats, each project, we keep an eye out on affordability. So if incomes have indeed been impacted, then we will adjust the prices of new HDB flats accordingly to ensure that every young couple, every young Singaporean looking to purchase a flat will be able to do so.
Excellent. So we've been talking a lot about affordability of new flats. I just want to move into older flats as well, because that's always a hot topic. People wanted to ask more about the asset value of leasehold flats, or what's the value of my flat as it ages. What sort of comments do you have for that?
Sure. It's a topic that I think, again, many Singaporeans are concerned about, leasehold properties.
Yes.
And perhaps just to set it in context, leasehold properties are not new. They are not unique to Singapore nor to HDB. We sell all HDB flats from the outset, since HDB started on a leasehold basis. All private residential land in Singapore from way back, long time ago, has been sold on a leasehold basis as well. And there is a reason why we do this. Because Singapore is just so small and we have so little land. If all of the land we sell is on a freehold basis, I'm
There'll be no
afraid
redevelopment in Singapore.
I'm afraid. I'm afraid the land that all the land that we have will eventually be captured by today's landowners, today's developers, and then what will happen to our children and the next generation? Inevitably, it means spiraling land prices going upwards in a very sharp way, and it will be very difficult for future generations to afford their own homes. And this is not a theoretical argument. You see this happening in cities everywhere in the world.
Yes.
So leasehold is important because it allows us to renew and rejuvenate land and ensure that it remains accessible and affordable to the future generation. That's an important concept. And I looked at what other political parties have put out on housing programs in their various manifestos very closely. And I'm quite heartened to see that there are many ideas, but all political parties, or rather the other way around, no political party has asked for HDB leasehold to turn into freehold. I think that's a good sign that all of us recognize
There's a common understanding.
that land has to be recycled and renewed for the next generation. You cannot just have freehold to benefit
Indeed.
the landowners today. But leasehold land on 99 years is a very long time. It is more than adequate for you and your children to live through their lifetimes. And leasehold properties, whether in HDB or in private, do have value for a long time, even as the properties get older.
But how about the value of, maybe just want to elaborate a little bit more on this issue where people ask, but how does my older flat increase in value as I grow old with it?
Sure. So how do we do this for public property, in particular for HDB? There are different ways in which we can ensure that the older HDB flat remains a good store of value for all Singaporeans. Number one, the government is committed to providing upgrading, heavily subsidized upgrading for all HDB flats. We are doing it, the first round of upgrading when the flat is about 30 years old. In fact, we will be launching this starting for quite a number of flats that were built from 1987 to 1997. So that's the first 30 years, right?
Yeah.
You do one round. When the flat is about 60 years, we are committed to do a second round of upgrading. So that ensures that the flats remain in good condition. Heavily subsidized program. Incidentally, if you're living in private condominium, you will never get that. What private condominium owners will have to do is they typically will have to pay a special levy into a sinking fund, and then the MCST will use that collection of that levy to do the R&R. Right? But in HDB, this is heavily subsidized by the government. Second, we've announced something called the Voluntary Early Redevelopment Scheme, or VERS. We are still working through the details because we are not going to launch this so soon.
Okay.
But the basic idea is that as the flats get older, the government will offer to buy back the flat from the homeowners. And if there is a majority support for buying back, then the government will do so, compensate the homeowners, and then they can take that compensation to purchase another flat, while the government will be able to take the land and redevelop and rejuvenate. We can build higher, we can build a better, 50 years' time. The design of homes will be very different.
Yes.
So we can build a different home, better homes. So that's second way in which we can ensure value for the existing homeowners, but also refresh and rejuvenate our existing stock of housing estates. Thirdly, we have provided more options throughout the life cycle of a HDB flat for the homeowner to be able to unlock that value of their flat. And they can do this through various ways. One, they can rent out a room.
Okay.
They could, if somebody gets older, they could what we call right size. Because as you get older, your children have gotten married, they would have purchased their own HDB flats. You may not need such a large space. So very often you have people living in 5-room flats saying, well, I don't need such a big flat. I sell my 5-room, I move to a 3-room or a studio, a 2-room flexi unit. and then in the process, they can unlock some value from their existing 5-room flats. Third way, we have something called a lease buyback scheme. It's a bit complex, but the basic idea is that most HDB flats today, in fact, all of them still have fairly long leases.
Yes.
So instead of having to sell the entire flat, a senior living in an older flat could sell part of the tail end of the lease back to the government.
Okay.
And then they continue staying in the same flat. In the process, they can unlock some value. Again, very complex idea.
Yeah.
Best that I use a worked example. So let me be
Slides.
property agent again.
Let's
show you
pull up that slide.
show you what it
please.
means.
So this is for seniors
So-
buying a lease buyback scheme, taking up the lease.
Taking
buyback?
up, that's right.
Okay.
So let's say you're an elderly couple, 65, and this is a real example. This is not make-up example. Real example, somebody 65 years old with a 4-room flat, it's worth about 400,000 now, and there's 65 years of lease remaining. Would the 65 years old couple need the entire 65 years of lease? Very, very unlikely. So we say you could, for example, retain 30 years of lease. That's sufficient to last you to age 95. And then you have another 35 years at the tail end you can sell back to the government. With that sale, you would receive about $60,000 in cash upfront, and you would get a lifelong monthly income of $1,000. That's not bad. So you stay in the same place for life, you unlock some cash proceeds, and on top of that, a lifelong pension, essentially, $1,000 for the rest of your life. That's a lease buyback. We've made it again from feedback from Alex,
That's also
various
that's
people.
wonderful.
It started with a lease buyback only for 3 and 4-room flats. We've made it available, a universal scheme, regardless of the size of the HDB flat that you live in. Everyone can, if you choose to, you can apply for a lease buyback, unlock value from your flat, and supplement your retirement income.
What's the take-up rate for that? Or do you have any feedback on how that scheme has been working out?
Well, I think for the lease buyback scheme, to me, it's one of the most unique propositions of any housing policy, which is why when it was first introduced, I was quite enthused by it. But there was another part of me that said, it's a great scheme, but none of my residents would benefit. My constituency is made out of 4-roomers and 5-roomers primarily. So when it was first introduced, they wouldn't benefit from it.
Okay.
So I pushed for it as much as possible, and I was quite glad, 1st January last year, every single flat type qualifies for it. It's something that I think people will need time to think through.
Yeah.
There are many options, as Minister has mentioned. You can right size to another flat, you can move in with your kids, you can decide to rent the room out, you can decide to do lease buyback. Those are a multitude of options for older Singaporeans to consider. There's no best. I wouldn't say there's one option that's the best.
It's
but
all
you-
circumstantial.
They're all circumstantial, and you've got to work through what's most comfortable for you.
Okay.
But the fact that we provide so many options for homeowners, especially older homeowners, does show that homeownership is core to the way we are as Singaporeans, and yet we want to allow them to have a home for life. And regardless of the decisions that they make, they'll always have a roof over their head.
I think in the beginning when it was first introduced, people were sort of doubtful because they were like, so what if my what do I leave for my children, you know, and all that. But after a while, there was a great realization of how valuable this was as a proposition, because you could unlock that value and still stay in your place for a long time, and your children will be getting their own flats anyway. So, you know, practically it just made a lot of sense. But, you know, we spoke earlier about how you give a little bit and there'll be a lot more people ask for. So what we've seen are also people who are younger than 65 appealing because my husband's 65, or like I'm going to be 65 in 2 years, but I need the money now. So you kind of have those kind of circumstances. And we were talking about the value of the talking about the value of flats, right, as they grow older. So, you know, even when we were, I personally think it's a brilliant idea to introduce VERS and also lease buyback. But verse itself, people say, why make it voluntary? Why don't you have it compulsory so that we can confirm we'll have value, you know? So
Yeah.
this is where like you, you know, the Malay has a saying, you give kasi betis nak peha. You give a bit, you want more lah. So, I mean, but I think it's genuine concerns. And as an MP, I mean, if, you know, we are elected again, these are issues that we will continue to champion because we saw how there were movements when, you know, it needed to be, it needed to happen. So I think we'll continue to raise these issues.
For sure, and all our, I mean, again, our PAP team, whether as if they are elected as members of parliament or in government, that's our, I mean, that's our basic premise, that we continue to listen to our residents, understand their concerns, and continue to improve our housing policies and housing programs for everyone, for all Singaporeans. Housing is tricky because, first of all, number one, people want more subsidies, want more help, want to make it cheaper, all sorts of, they want more. I can understand. And the challenge for me or for any minister in charge of national development for that matter is that it is very hard to satisfy everyone. First of all, we have to ensure that whatever we do is sustainable in the long term. It's not just making people happy
Yes,
today, but making sure that the schemes are fiscally sustainable and can, you know, will not overburden our next generation. Number two, with housing in particular, you get sometimes ideas that are competing and can never be reconciled because, first of all, the potential buyers will tell you, I want it cheap, I want it cheap, I want it cheap.
That's right.
The cheaper you make,
Something
flats,
here.
the existing owners will tell you, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Keep it up. Ensure that the values are higher.
Yeah, of course.
Because if you make it cheaper and cheaper, my flat value will get impacted. So,
How? So how? Where does that leave you? The government.
So in the end, at the end, you know, it is a complex situation. We are dealing with, and it is a very important, you know, topic because it impacts on so many people's lives, and that's why we take in every suggestion seriously. We study them, but we have to, in the end, look at the overall picture and do what is responsible and what is right for Singaporeans.
I mean, these are very valid concerns that you guys are making a concerted effort to address. I would like to just take a question now from our Facebook audience,
Sure.
and this comes from Ad. Ad Sim, how does the Ministry of National Development ensure that the EIP or Ethnic Integration Policy is current, and how is it different from a decade ago versus now?
Yeah. Well, the ethnic integration policy is, again, something unique to Singapore. You probably won't find it anywhere else in the world. It is something quite intrusive, to be fair, and it's something that really, you know, it's an intervention that gets into what you can do with your flat, because we do require every block, every neighborhood, to have a diverse mix of people from different ethnic backgrounds. We do not want to have any part of Singapore becoming an ethnic enclave. And we have succeeded in that. If you look around, unlike any other city in the world, everywhere you go, it's a microcosm of Singapore. It's diverse, people from different backgrounds. Our children grow up together, they play in a playgrounds, they go to the same schools, and they are all from different backgrounds.
It's now part of our social compact.
Very much so. So I think it is something precious that we should keep in our housing system. It is something unique. It's something that we should keep. But I do understand that with the EIP, sometimes you do have people who find it genuinely very hard to sell their flats, and it can apply to both different groups, right? In a place where you already have strong, large groups of Chinese owners existing, then if you have an issue where minorities find it difficult to sell, right? For example, in the area that I serve in Marsiling, the problem is opposite, where you have majority group Chinese sellers finding it harder to sell. So you find these sorts of issues cropping up because you bump into the ethnic quotas. right? And then you are unable to sell to that particular group, and you are constrained in terms of the people you can sell to.
Right.
So this imposes constraints on the seller, and therefore the seller feels like,
His hands are tied.
I am constrained, I have fewer options, this is an imposition on me. So we do understand this happens, and therefore what we do, rather than abandon the entire system, we do exercise some flexibility for people who do face difficulties in selling their flats because of the ethnic quotas.
Okay.
I think we've raised that issue a couple of times in Parliament.
Indeed so,
And it's quite heartening, I think, in situations also that we see from amongst our residents. We do write in when situations are a bit tough, and HDB does exercise some sort of assistance in either giving them extension of time to sell their flat. And so that's, I think, quite meaningful, because I think flexibility is key in this kind of situation. Because I think at the core of it, it's an important policy. The unfortunate side effect is if they're selling and they are not able to get the price that they desire because they are limited to only selling to a particular group. So these are some of the issues that has come up and has also been raised and has kindly been answered also in Parliament. And I think this is always work in progress.
Will we be seeing more edits to the EIP, maybe, or do you think it's like changes to it, or do you think it's just more of like a flexibility thing, case by case basis?
Well, the core of it, I think the main objective remains one where we want to ensure that our housing estates everywhere in Singapore is diverse, is well represented by Singaporeans from all backgrounds, and not to have any ethnic enclave in Singapore. So that's the core objective. That objective is something I believe many Singaporeans, if not all Singaporeans, would uphold.
Yes.
The question then is the means to getting there. And if someone were to suggest some other way of doing it, aside from having a quota system, I would be very happy to listen to different ideas. Like I said, the whole point of HDB and housing policies is our policies are never static. They are always evolving and being updated. Depending on the times, depending on changing circumstances, and the feedback and suggestions from Singaporeans.
I want to talk about the housing policies for singles who are looking for a flat,
Sure.
whether there are any new updates to that. I know, Alex, you, as an issue quite close to your heart, you've been championing for some of these criterias to be eased for singles looking to purchase or even rent an HDB.
Well, I think singles are a growing group of people. People do marry a little bit later today, or they want to remain single for life.
Yeah.
In the earlier period, I think many of them face constraints because they are single income. So if you tell them that your income level is a bit too high for, say, 2 flexi flats, yet at the same time the income level is insufficient for something private. But I'm quite thankful that over the years, MND has become a lot more flexible. We've extended 2-room flexis to singles, and I think that's an option for them, and I think we can do more in the future. But as Minister has rightly mentioned, it's always about a balance, right? We have limited land, we have limited resources. Where do we put our commitment to first? So I'm heartened that MND has made inroads as much as possible. It's still something that I will champion for over the long term, and I'm sure Minister will be open to more ideas from us as well.
No, we've looked at some of the more vulnerable groups, say singles, divorced families, single parents. Are there any other pockets of groups that we might have overlooked in this?
Maybe those who are moving from, say, rental housing to, so I really like the Fresh Start scheme,
Yes.
which allows for a graduation of sorts from, to house ownership. With financial assistance given so that they will eventually own their own house. I think that's something that we should really encourage, because there's a part that they play in taking responsibility, but at the same time also opening that door to actually owning a house. And I think that's something that we should be proud of, and I think we should work towards getting more in our community having access to it.
Yeah, that's a scheme that has worked well. It's not large numbers, But I think when you look at the beneficiaries of the
Yeah,
scheme and you
it's
see
very
them
heartening.
come forward and they collect the keys for the first time
Yes.
with their
Amazing.
families,
Yep.
and the joy in their faces, it's
pride as well.
the pride that they have in being able to move into their own homes, that's really very rewarding. So under Fresh Start, we give an additional grant, meaning to say these are people who have already consumed their housing subsidies, but we are giving them another grant on condition that they, get their finances in order, that they make certain commitments, and then if they have the sustainable finances, then we will accord them the grant, and they are able to, get onto that path of owning a home, and it's very motivating for them. So I think it's a scheme that is. No, you don't see a lot of take-up yet, but hopefully more people will be motivated to do so, and then they can get onto that path of home ownership. At the same time, while we do that, we recognize that there will be a segment in our society who may not be able to own homes for a whole range of reasons. And it's fine if you are unable to, then we should provide you with rental flats that you can rent from the government, and these will be extended at very affordable and highly subsidized rates. So over the years, we've also built more and more rental flats. It used to be that the queue for rental flats was in months, quite a long time. But because we have built more rental flats, now that queue has come down to about 2 months. Sometimes people need a bit of time, but that's only because they want a particular location. And then again, I'm back to that. I don't have
Enough.
I don't have
Magic wand, need to ballot.
I don't have magic wand. I don't have instant flats, right? But as far as supply is concerned, we've built more rental flats. And if you're not particular about location, the queue can be as short as 2 months, maybe even less. Right? So for that segment where really home ownership is some distance away, it's difficult, then we provide them with a roof over their heads for their families, and rental is an option. And there will be some segment that will avail themselves to this option. But by and large, many people who are in rental do want to own their homes.
Yes.
We see many of these examples, and we also are trying our best to help them.
And so tonight we've spoken about affordability, we've looked at lease buyback scheme, we've spoken about a lot of schemes, but the overarching topic, the title of the topic is Improved Housing, Public Housing for All. I'd just like to get maybe a teaser from you, Minister, too, about what improvements can we see in our neighborhood estates coming
Sure.
up? I know
Yeah.
for the topic of greenery, we said we're going to look at these HDB green towns that are coming
Yes.
up, but we'd like to find out, what spruced up enhancements can we see?
Sure. Well, first of all, you get a sense of what can be done when you look at our new towns. Because each time we build a new town, we stretch the envelope, we push the boundary, and we set a higher standard. This was the case in Punggol, and now we are building Tengah as a forest town, and we are again, really lifting bringing it to much higher levels of a very inclusive, sustainable, and green environment. We're talking more solar panels, more community gardens, more public spaces, convenient amenities and facilities. Even within the HDB block, we have what we call district cooling, right? So you don't need to have your own aircon unit. It's come in, plug and play, literally. The aircon is like a commercial building, right? It's already, installed,
Yeah.
right? So all of these are done in our latest town. Then, of course, what do you do with the existing
Yes,
towns, right? So the latest town, we put in everything we can, smart living, we make use of technology, we get green, sustainable concepts, we push the boundaries. Of course, then we go back to all the existing towns and we put in place upgrading programs for them. And we have a whole range of different upgrading programs that we are doing across all towns and all estates. We want to make them greener and more sustainable, so that's the Green Town program. We want to make, to quote DPM, every town, or to paraphrase his favorite slogan, we will make every HDB town a green town. And we will extend that across all our HDB towns.
Old or new, right?
Old or new. And we will also systematically upgrade the older HDB estates with remaking of heartlands programs, with neighborhood upgrading. These are, or schemes that are already in place. And year by year, we put in more resources in order to ensure that these towns are progressively upgraded.
Something to look forward to. And so if we could just wrap up our session today with a question for each of you. How do you see our HDB evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? Maybe we'll start with you, Rahayu.
I think it's a wish and hope because, I joked earlier about how people always want to ask for more. But as Alex highlighted and also Minister, you said, housing is at the core of our very being as Singaporeans. And we definitely, I think, have that vision of it being a safe haven, where one can grow, build their families and grow old. And, it's that lofty ideal that I think we all should strive towards. And I think that will require continued engagement and also continued, understanding of how things are evolving. And also, I like the fact that, over the years, the Ministry and HDB has been very open in looking in at our feedback and all the different specific issues. So I hope that's something that we will continue to have, that conversation, to continue to build the frameworks better, to allow for our wishes to be granted in that sense. So I suppose that's my personal vision, and hopefully that's something we can achieve together as a community.
Something that we can all aspire towards.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Alex?
Indeed, Yvonne, the word that you use, aspire, I think while we continue to have greener towns, better towns, more tech-savvy towns, those are wonderful. But what I really hope that in 10, 20, 50 years from now, that our housing policy remains at the core of Singapore identity, that it is fair, that it is equitable, that it is something that every Singaporean can hold as his own, that I have a home, that is clean, a home that I can be proud of, and something that's affordable to me. And as I look around me, I see my neighbors, I see them grow up, my children grow up with them, and that keeps Singapore fair, that keeps Singapore the unique place it is. So while we push the boundaries, the heart of our housing policy must not change.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Minister Wong.
Well, Yvonne, as I started out by saying, housing is really a national institution in Singapore. It's a national treasure.
It is. Yes. People propose with an HDB, right? I mean, how can you get more nationally instituted than that?
And for us, this is really a precious jewel that all of us, every Singaporean, regardless of your background and beliefs, every Singaporean, I think, should hold dear. And all of us are invested in this process of continually improving this institution of public housing in Singapore, because it's so special, it's so core to our Singaporean identity. So as the PAP, we are committed to this process of improving it. As I said, every elected member of parliament, the PAP government will work with every Singaporean, taking in ideas, taking in feedback and suggestions every year, making improvements to our housing program, so that it continues to remain relevant, affordable, quality homes for everyone, more inclusive, more sustainable, and at the end of the day, ensuring that our next generation can look forward to better homes for themselves. So this is a never-ending process. It's a continuous process which we are committed to, and it's, as Alex said, an important part of the fabric of Singapore society, of a fair and just society that we want to uphold in Singapore.
Well said. HDB is like a constant work in progress, and you never know. 30 years from now, the HDB that we know will be very different from
Very much.
the ones that your parents experienced last time.
Any
Any one of us, yes.
All of
All of
us.
us.
Absolutely.
I have no doubt that it will be so. In fact, if you think about the way we have to consider, a lot of redevelopment coming up in the future, because the flats, as we have talked about, will get older.
Yeah.
You will see a lot fewer greenfield sites, right? and then you need to recycle the land. So we have been, joked amongst ourselves and MND that HDB in future will have to be called the Housing Redevelopment Board, because it's no longer just a task of building new, but it's also a task of redevelopment, refreshing, rejuvenation. And so it's a constant work in progress.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is, people are living longer now. So that rejuvenation and refreshment, I think that's something that our silver generation and me in 30 years' time, I would want to see that too.
Yes.
Right. And we were going to close, but we have one more pressing question that we would like you to address, Minister. This comes from Ting Ting Lee. Hi, Minister Wong. How do you juggle between elections and all the COVID stuff? You must be super stressed, man. This is quote unquote. How do you stay sane? Minister,
Barely.
would you like to answer this for us before we let you go tonight?
So today we had our usual multi-ministry task force meeting. I just came from a MTF press conference, and now I'm doing this
Without
talk
dinner.
show. We
Or
managed to
dinner
get
after. Managed to get a bite.
a grab, thanks to Alex who tapao something for me. But this is, we have to juggle all these different balls at this time. And importantly, can I say something on COVID, even though it's not the right topic?
Yes, of course. Yes, you asked how do you do it with all this COVID stuff.
COVID is the topic.
Because it is so important. So we are still meeting because the fight against COVID is not over. And we just had a press conference just to highlight the importance of everyone staying vigilant, disciplined, and the need for us to keep watch over the situation. Already we are seeing some increase in unlinked cases these recent days, and we are monitoring it very closely. That's why at the task force level, even though it's election season, that remains the work never stops, and that remains our preoccupation.
The lives, the health and livelihoods of our people and our healthcare workers.
And many frontliners are still out there working their guts out, trying to fight the infection and stop the virus.
Well, thank you, Ting Ting Lee, for your question. Minister Wong says he's trying to stay sane and he managed to grab a bite tonight, but we're going to let him go now and let our PAP candidates go as well. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation
Thank you.
on housing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us too and chiming in with your questions. You've been watching Straight Talk with PAP. My name is Yvonne Chan. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.